up on the world today. 2020 Nobel Peace Prize awarded to the United Nations World Food Program. U.S. President Donald Trump's doctor says he is ready to return to public duties at the weekend. Plus, several European countries register record spikes in new daily cases. Hello and welcome to The World Today. I'm Akaite Afia. We began the program today with some cheery news for the United Nations World Food Program, WFP, who has won the 2020 Nobel Peace Prize for its efforts to combat hunger. The Norwegian Nobel Committee says the WFP has acted as a driving force in efforts to prevent the use of hunger as a weapon of war and conflict. The Nobel Prize is one of the world's most important awards. It was started in accordance with the will of Swedish inventor Alfred Nobel, with the first award handed out in 1901.
The Norwegian Nobel Committee has decided to award the Nobel Peace Prize for 2020 to the World Food Program for its efforts to combat hunger, for its contribution to bettering conditions for peace in conflict-affected areas, and for acting as a driving force in efforts to prevent the use of hunger as a weapon of war and conflict.
I can't believe I'm in Niger when we got the award.
As you can see there, WFP Executive Director David Beasley was visibly happy when he received the good news that the World Food Program won the 2020 Nobel Peace Prize. Mr. Beasley could be heard saying to WFP staff members in Niger, quote, "I can't believe that I'm in Niger when we get the award. I didn't win it, you won it. It's all of us. Thank you all." He says the United Nations World Food Program is deeply humbled by the announcement. WFP runs a logistics service that has dispatched medical cargoes to over 120 countries throughout the pandemic to help government and health partners fighting COVID-19. It also has provided passenger services to ferry humanitarian and health workers where commercial flights were unavailable.
It's the first time in my life I've
Reactions now. United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres congratulated the World Food Program for winning the Nobel Peace Prize, saying he is delighted by the decision. The United Nations, which turns 75 this month, has itself won the Nobel Peace Prize in the past, as have several of its agencies, including the High Commissioner for Refugees, the UNICEF Children's Fund, and its peacekeeping forces.
I am delighted by the decision of the Nobel Committee to award this year's Nobel Peace Prize to the United Nations World Food Program. I warmly congratulate David Beasley, WFP Executive Director, and the entire staff of the World Food Program on this recognition. The World Food Program is the world's first responder on the front lines of food insecurity. In my 10 years as United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees, I had the privilege to work hand in hand with my colleagues from the World Food Program. And I've seen them in the most remote and dangerous locations, with enormous courage, dedication and competence, serving the most vulnerable of the vulnerable people of this world. In a world of plenty, it is unthinkable that hundreds of millions go to bed each night hungry. Millions more are now on the precipice of famine due to the COVID-19 pandemic.
To to other stories now. U.S. President Donald Trump has completed his course of treatment for COVID-19 and can return to public engagements this weekend. Now, that's according to the president's physician, Dr. Sean Conley, who says Mr. Trump has responded extremely well to medication and has remained stable. While speaking in an interview with Fox News, the president says he will probably take another COVID test today, and he is hoping to hold a rally over the weekend.
I think I'm going to try doing a rally on Saturday night if we have enough time to put it together. But we want to do a rally in Florida, probably in Florida on Saturday night. Might come back and do one in Pennsylvania in the following night, and it's incredible what's going on. I feel so good. Well, what we're doing is probably the test will be tomorrow, the actual test, because there's no reason to test all the time. But they found very little infection or virus. If any. I don't know that they found any. I didn't go into it greatly with the doctors. But I will say this, absentee is okay, because absentee ballots, excuse me, absentee ballots are fine.
The VOA's senior White House correspondent, Patsy Widakuswara, joins us now from Washington, D.C. for more. Patsy, thanks for joining us on the program.
My pleasure.
So tell us, how are Americans reacting to President Trump's tentative plan to hold rallies this weekend?
Well, there's no really definitive or scientific way for me to answer that question other than looking at chatter on social media. But I think it's safe to say that in general, the way are responding to the president's plans to do a rally this weekend is generally in line with how Americans view whatever the president says or does. His supporters will support it, and his detractors will criticize it. Now, it's important to note that even though, as the clip that you played, the president said that he has plans to do a rally potentially in Florida and also Pennsylvania this week, if we look at the Trump campaign website, there's nothing scheduled for an in-person appearance by the president anytime this weekend. There are events with surrogates such as Donald Trump Jr., Mike Pence, Vice President Mike Pence, and Second Lady Karen Pence, but there's nothing scheduled as of right now with the president himself this weekend.
While speaking on Fox News, the president also says that he'll probably take a COVID-19 test today. So is there any update on that?
So we haven't received any update from the White House doctors. They usually give us an update in the evening. Yesterday's update came out at around 7 p.m. at night. And as you pointed out, the White House physicians are saying that the president's in the clear to do in-person events, to safely return to his public engagement. But there's, of course, a lot of questions on just how much the White House is sharing this kind of information with us, particularly when was the last date of the president's negative test. Over and over, White House officials have refused to answer that question as to when did the president last have his negative test. So this is, of course, a question that will continue to be asked by journalists, and we'll see what kind of update that the president's doctors give us today.
Well, President Trump has tried to pass his illness off as a blessing from God and a way of testing the efficacy of all these experimental drugs he was given as treatment. So has this by any chance boosted his poll ratings? Do voters actually buy into this claim?
So the latest polls that we see on average show that Joe Biden is leading nationally by about 11 points. Some are higher, some are lower, but that's kind of like where we are on average. And you're right that the Trump campaign, as well as the administration, is really trying to frame the president's illness as an electoral asset rather than a liability, saying that the president's illness gives him firsthand experience that Joe Biden does not have in terms of COVID. One particularly vulnerable demographic group that the president has tried to reach out and his campaign has tried to reach out are the seniors, who are particularly vulnerable to this virus. Yesterday, we saw the Trump campaign and the president himself tweeting out a video of his message to seniors in terms of how, he has battled this virus, he is overcoming it with these great drugs, and he wants them to be able to have the same access to these drugs if they also fall ill. It's important to note that the group of seniors was a group that the president won handily in 2016. But as of this point, Joe Biden is leading in that group by 20 plus points.
Well, finally, before we let you go, Patsy, we understand that President Trump will participate in a virtual rally with conservative host Rush Limbaugh. But the president says a virtual debate with Joe Biden will be a waste of time and that he would not participate. How can you explain this contradiction?
I honestly cannot, but I can perhaps point to the fact that the president's doctors have said that, if we count back to his diagnosis, which we learned of Friday early morning, Saturday would be 10 days after the diagnosis, in which case the president, according to his physicians, is able to safely return to public engagement and in-person appearances. So perhaps that's why the Trump campaign is saying that, a virtual rally with Rush Limbaugh, which is happening right now, is okay, but a virtual debate with Joe Biden is a waste of time because the president wants to do it in person. Also, in part, as a show of strength and projecting that he is recovering strongly and swiftly from the virus.
Well, Patsy, just before we let you go, we just wanted to know, what do you think about all of these engagements, these public engagements that the president has been speaking of and that he wants to do over the weekend? Well,
I was at the White House yesterday, and it was much more quiet. It was a lot less journalists in the campus. So there's definitely a lot of concerns from both journalists as well as aides in terms of having the president return safely to his public engagements. Now, of course, this is a concern that some people have, and a concern that perhaps the administration is trying to dismiss by saying that the president will return to his public engagement, and he will do so in a safe manner that takes into account everybody else's safety. But of course, there's a lot of questions about this. But again, I must underline that to his supporters, the president is, in their mind, recovering strongly and swiftly. There's a lot of social media comments, for example, saying that they don't believe that the president is sick, the president just has COVID, and that he is recovering well from it. So there's definitely a divergent view between Americans in terms of how they see the president and his illness.
All right. Well, Patsy, thank you so much for joining us, and please stay safe out there.
Thank you.
Hit by a second wave, several European countries are seeing record spikes in new daily cases, leading leaders to impose tougher restriction measures. Let's get a wrap-up of some of these measures and other developments on our COVID-19 Global Update.
Data from the Office of National Statistics shows that an estimated 1 in 240 people in England were infected with coronavirus after cases increased rapidly at the end of September. The ONS estimates that 7,200 people a day were being infected in homes in England between September the 25th and October the 1st. The figures come as science advisors warn hospital admissions are very close to levels in early March, and ministers say cases are getting out of control. According to reports, England is expected to announce a new 3-tier system for local restrictions next week. Russia has reported the highest daily number of coronavirus infections since the pandemic began, with 12,126 in the past 24 hours. The previous record was on May the 11th, with 11,656 new cases. The Spanish government has ordered a 15-day state of emergency to bring down COVID-19 infection rates in the capital after a court overturned the partial lockdown imposed a week ago. Madrid and 9 nearby cities will see restrictions on movement enforced. Over in France, the government has imposed tighter coronavirus restrictions in 4 more cities with high infection rates. Bars and restaurants will have to close, as they did in the capital earlier this week. Brussels Premier Rudy Vervoort has tested positive for COVID-19. It comes after the whole Brussels regional government went into self-isolation on Wednesday night, and a Flemish minister's office colleague died of the virus. From today, Belgians can keep only 3 close contacts, let 4 people into their homes at the same time, and cafes have to close at 11.
After the break, we'll have more on the COVID-19 pandemic. Plus, we meet France's 6-year-old piano prodigy. Stay with us. Thanks for staying with us. British Finance Minister Rishi Sunak has announced the latest program to stave off a surge in unemployment, offering extra help for businesses and workers who are forced to stop working during local coronavirus lockdowns. In a move likely to cost billions of pounds over the 6 months duration of the new scheme, Sunak said the government will pay up to 2/3 of each employee's salary, with a cap of £2,100 a month, if they work for companies that are forced to close temporarily. The announcement represented an expansion of the government's job support scheme, which itself is the replacement of the broader furlough scheme that ends this month, for companies ordered to close and leaving their workers displaced.
Throughout this crisis, my priority has always been to protect jobs. So today I'm announcing an expansion of our job support scheme, specifically to protect those jobs of people who work in businesses that may be asked to close. If that happens, those workers will receive 2/3 of their wages for the time that they're unable to go to work. I hope that this provides reassurance and a safety net for people and businesses in advance of what may be a difficult winter.
Meanwhile, a state of emergency has come into force in Kyrgyzstan after rival protesters fought at rallies in the streets of the capital, Bishkek. Shots were fired at the car of former President Almazbek Atambayev at a rally. According to reports, he was unarmed. Unrest has gripped the Central Asian country since a disputed parliamentary election last Sunday. On Tuesday, demonstrators stormed the country's parliament, demanding that a new vote be held. The state of emergency is to last until October 21st. The curfew and strict military restrictions have been imposed, including controls on who can travel in and out of the capital. The decree also gives permission to the army to set up security posts in Bishkek, deploying soldiers and military hardware. Back home here in Nigeria, sporadic protests have broken out across Nigeria in recent days against the activities of the Special Anti-Robbery Squad, SARS. Today, protesters converged in Alausa, Lagos, chanting for the immediate dissolution of the squad.
The youth in Nigeria, we are saying enough is enough. We are saying we want to be heard. If all the youth in Nigeria die, who will be that future of tomorrow? I want to know. Who is that future of tomorrow that they always say? Who is the future? So now we are tired. Now we want to take responsibility. We have a government that is accountable to us. You cannot be watching while the SARS, while police officers that are supposed to be protecting our lives are killing us day by day. And we keep making noise about it. We keep making noise about it. The reason why I'm out here is because I'm scared.
They were later allowed into the chambers of the Lagos State House of Assembly for an emergency plenary. The Speaker of the House convened an emergency plenary after protesters camped outside the Assembly complex. He read the petition of the NSTARS protesters, and after deliberation by the members, the Lagos State House of Assembly commended the youth for the peaceful manner in which they've been protesting the excess of SARS. Amongst other resolutions, the Lagos Assembly has also resolved to communicate with the Commissioner of Police in Lagos that no police officer should indiscriminately harass residents. The protest walks, which are coming days after the Inspector General of Police issued a directive modifying FSAR's operations, took place in some major cities including Abuja, Owerri, and Ilorin. We'll, of course, have more on that story on our website and subsequent bulletins.
You're not allowed to talk.
Moving to some lighter stories now, the Royal Ballet, Britain's largest ballet company, leaps back into action after 7 months of COVID-19 gloom with an extravaganza that mixes classics such as Romeo and Juliet and Don Quixote with playful modern dance. Restrictions imposed to slow the spread of the novel coronavirus have battered the performing arts across the globe. Theaters and concert halls have lain empty for months, and many musicians, actors, and dancers have been stuck at home. In a 3-hour live stream performance from the Royal Opera House in central London, around 70 dancers will bound from Romeo and Juliet, Swan Lake, and Don Quixote towards a finale of Kenneth Macmillan's Wild Elite Syncopations.
Yeah, it's what we all love to do, so...
It's like 7 months of pent-up energy, excitement to develop further, because obviously this is careers we're talking about training that we've done for so many years, and this is what we did all that training for, to perform, to share this art, and to not have been done that for so long. It really causes a lot of distress, really, and it's incredible that we get to be back on this glorious stage.
I think time, other than injuries that dancers may have had, that we've all been away from our daily routine, our training as we know it, and performing on stage. So I think the fact that we've been away for so long has made us hungry and more resilient, and appreciate it as well, what we do and how much we enjoy.
Guillaume Benoliel, a French concert pianist who is just 6 years old. As a 1-year-old, the young pianist would sit on his mother's knee and play with the piano keys at home. His parents, Claire and Dominique, both of them amateur musicians, realized they could hear a tune, then play it himself, and that he had a perfect musical ear. They sent him for his first piano lesson at age 4. In late August, Benoliel had his moment in the spotlight in Salzburg, the Austrian city and birthplace of composer Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart. Away from concert halls, music for the 6-year-old is simply a fun experience that he shares with his family. Guillaume goes to school, plays sports, and enjoys swimming. He has expressed the desire to learn a second instrument, a violin he received as a gift from his grandmother. His mother says as for his future career, she will let her son decide. But she says whatever path he takes, she hopes music will still be present in his life. Well, that is all for the world today. Thank you so much for staying with us. I'm Akaite Afia. Have a great weekend and stay safe.